If I could have your attention, please. I'd like to acknowledge that the public access to this meeting will occur in rooms 2 and 3 of the Blinn College District Student Center at 651 Blinn Boulevard, Brenham, Texas. Any member of the public who wishes to attend the meeting or make public comment of the meeting will do so in rooms 2 and 3 of the Student Center. As required by state law, this meeting is open to the public, but by telephone communication. The college is complying with the suspended proceedings of the Open Meetings Act in accordance with sections 418.016 of the Texas Government Code. Members of the public are entitled to participate and address the college through remote connections. There is a live stream of this meeting available on youtube.com/Blinn1883. The subjects to be discussed or considered upon can be taken in any action upon which any formal action may be taken are as follows. Items will not be considered in the same order as those in the meeting notice. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of Tuesday, January 6th of the Blinn College Board of Trustees. It is the appointed time. The Texas Government Code permits the Board of Trustees to meet in a closed executive session for the following reasons, among others: to consult with the college district's attorneys on matters deemed privileged by the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct or Government Code 551.071, to deliberate regarding real property under 551.072, a prospective gift under 551.073, certain personnel matters under 551.074, security devices or security audits under 551.076, and economic development negotiations under 551.087. If the board meets in closed session, we will announce the particular section under which we will be doing so prior to the initial closing of that portion of the meeting. And it's our intent to have a closed session this evening. I would now like to call on the Reverend Randy Wells for our invocation, and Teddy Bain to lead us in the pledge to the Texas and American flags. If you'd stand, please.
Let us pray. Father God, in the name of Jesus Christ, we bow in your presence and we pray, God, for our country. We pray for our college. We thank you for sage leadership and solid leadership in these perilous times. We pray, Father God, for our students and our staff, and we ask that your presence be here on tonight as we deliberate the issues as it relates to the Blinn College. We thank you for our chancellor, in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Trustee Wells and Trustee Bain. We have no one has signed up for the public comment section of our board meeting, so we'll move on to the reports. And I would ask Chancellor Hensley if she would give the administrative report. Dr. Hensley.
Thank you, Chair Mosier, and good evening, everyone. Trustees, if I could direct your attention to our television screen tonight. As you know, trustees, this spring was a semester unlike any that we have ever experienced, certainly in Blinn's 137-year history. And despite facing unique challenges, I wanted to share with you tonight that we had 2,417 students who earned Chancellor's and Dean's Scholar honors for the spring semester. We named 1,144 students to our Chancellor Scholars list, which recognizes students who earn at least a 3.75 GPA and who completed at least 12 credit hours and passed all of their classes. The college also named 1,273 students to our Dean's Scholars list, and that recognizes students who received a GPA of at least 3.25, 12 credit hours, and of course pass all of their classes. So we'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of these wonderful students. Let's move over to enrollment. Trustees, the May mini-mester began on May the 15th, and I am so delighted to report to you that once again, Blinn posted a record enrollment, the highest ever for the term. Vice Chancellor for Administration and Student Services, Karen Buck, who's over in Bryan right now, will give a full report later this evening. But I wanted to share the good news that Blinn set a new enrollment record with 1,463 students during the May mini-mester, which is an increase of 15.2% over last year. And I'd like to continue to tell you a little bit about our summer enrollment. For summer term 1, we also are delighted to share with you, trustees, that we set another new record. And we have 6,829 students. This is a 5.8% increase over last year. So very good news to share with you tonight regarding May mini-mester and summer 1, particularly when you consider all the circumstances that we're dealing with at this moment in time. Trustees, we do continue to register students for summer 2. That begins on Monday, July the 6th. And then, of course, the fall semester, which begins on Monday, August the 24th, will keep you very apprised of how those enrollments are looking. Now I'd like to tell you about some grant-funded training. Our wonderful Division of Technical and Community Education and the Texas Workforce Commission are partnering to provide specialized training opportunities for businesses and individuals that have been impacted by COVID-19. This training has been available through a $287,500 Texas Workforce Commission Skills Development Grant Fund, specifically for COVID-19 Special Initiative grant monies. I'm so pleased with our leadership that we've received from our Dean of Technical and Community Education, Jay Anderson, and his entire team, and his Assistant Dean, Carla Flanagan. They have just done an outstanding job in reaching out to companies in our region, in Blinn's service area, that can benefit from this special training. We've already trained at least 2 companies that I'm aware of, and they're in the process of providing further training. So this is very, very good news for our training opportunities for workforce and technical education. And something new we tried this year that I'm also pleased to share with you. You've heard a little bit about it, I think, already, and this is our livestock judging camp. So we held our first time ever virtual livestock judging camp. It took place earlier this month, and it was a great success. We had 92 students who came from 9 states who participated in this camp, and it also included a large number of students who came from our Blinn service area as well. We offered the camp in partnership with an organization called Judge to Win, and it's an innovative online service that provides specifically livestock judging training tools. So I'd particularly like to thank Vice Chancellor for Instruction, Dr. Marcelo Busicki, and Assistant Dean of Agricultural Sciences, Bryn Binke, and our Professor Bryce Mund. They just did a terrific job in jumping off and trying something new, and I think it was a great success, so I'd really like to thank them. Let's move over now to our facilities update. At this time, I'd like to give you a little bit of an update on each one of our current projects. So on the Brenham campus, construction has begun on the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Innovation building. The underground utilities are being installed, and the City of Brenham is coordinating the sewer connection. And this project is still scheduled for completion by August of 2021. And then in regards to the P3 student housing project, we are still on track with this project in relation to the issuance of the bond rating package. We are going to continue to keep you trustees updated in the progress of the P3 based on some of our recent conversations. We'll keep you apprised as we progress on that particular project. Let's move over to the College Park Apartments, and I think, if you'll go back one slide, thank you. So at the College Park Apartments on the Brenham campus, work is underway to install access control on the exterior doors. 70 access control lock sets have been delivered, and the subcontractor has begun installing those in buildings 4 through 7. Additionally, 11 frames and doors have been delivered, and installation began on the week of June the 8th. The remainder of the doors will arrive before the end of this month, before the end of June, and this project is scheduled for completion by the end of July. And to the ever-present cast stone plate replacement, it's still in progress. The north facade of Building F is nearing completion, and all of the other buildings are finished. So we'll have a round of applause when I get to announce that this project is finally completed. Not quite, but we're getting close. And then at the T building over at the Bryan campus, the contractor for the building T roof project is reinstalling a gas line and installing metal trim, and a substantial completion walkthrough is planned to take place later this week. So that one's moving along well. And then at the Rellis campus, we have the Agriculture and Workforce Education Complex. It is substantially complete at this time, and as I mentioned in our last meeting, we likely will have a grand opening ceremony for this facility in September. That date has not been determined yet. It's still everything that's a fluid in terms of having organized meetings and group gatherings, so we're not quite sure when that will be held, but we are scheduled to open this building and have classes there this August. And I think I've told you before, but just to reiterate, Jay Anderson and his team will be operating out of this building. That's for all of our workforce and technical programs, and then we will be sometime soon vacating Highway 60 for that location to move over to completely being operated out of Rellis campus. Now, this is something you haven't heard, so I'm so pleased to announce Back with Blinn. This is our new logo, and the trustees, following this evening's meeting, I am going to be sending out an announcement to all of our faculty and our staff and our students. And this is going to, again, continuing with our outlining for all of our plans for coming back in July and August and for the fall semester. So this marks the launch of a plan this evening that we are calling Back with Blinn, and it has 3 primary goals. We want to share our excitement for the upcoming fall semester. We want to describe all of the safeguards that we have put in place to allow employees and students to return to campus. And we want to share information regarding the ways that we have adapted the entire academic experience for next fall because of COVID-19. So this is Black with Blinn, and it's at www.blinn.edu/backwithblinn. And on this site, it's for employees, it's for students, it's for anybody interested in what Blinn is doing in this current situation. It has information about academics, about campus housing, about campus safety and health, about campus services and activities, about self-certification before you come on to a Blinn campus. It has information about COVID-19 testing. It has information about how to help to stop the spread of the virus, and it has very specific information that students will want to know, parents will want to know, and faculty and staff will want to know. I'd really like to thank Leighton Schubert and Rich Bray for spending quite a significant amount of time in developing this website. This is going to be, trustees, your main place to go. If you have any constituents that you serve that ask about questions about Blinn, if you could direct them to this website, this will have all of the information that should answer their questions. We do anticipate putting a little bit more information out to you on your computer, so you'll be aware of this as it changes a little bit. This is going to be launched tonight. As soon as the board meeting is over this evening, we'll send it out college-wide. This site also includes some informational videos, and we have targeted them specifically of interest to incoming students who might be interested in about whether they should or should not make the decision to come to Blinn. So we have virtual visits with prospective student relations and with our advisors. So this is really a magnificent, I think, web link. I'm so pleased to talk about it tonight, and sincerely thank so many who contributed to this. So please look forward to seeing this page and its information. It's going to be shared in most of our Blinn advertising, in all of our media publications, and in our social media and on radio. So everything that we do about coming back to Blinn in the fall is going to be funneled through this information site. And then in conclusion, trustees, this evening, I would like to let you know that we have a special guest who is joining us from another campus location this evening, and her name is Eunice Kelm. I think all of you know her. And so Eunice, I think you can see me, and I know you can hear me, and so I'd like to say hello, and we're so delighted to have you join us through camera this evening. I believe that she is joined with Susan Myers from the Foundation in classroom rooms 2 and 3 in the Student Center this evening. So thank you both for being here. Trustees, as you know, we have an agenda item on item 5C tonight, and it is going to seek the board's authorization for documents related to the donation of approximately 186 acres located in Washington County. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mrs. Kelm for joining us this evening, and for her generosity, and for her friendship, and for her support of the Blinn College Foundation as well as Blinn College. And I'd also like to thank her for her expressed friendship and support of our Agricultural Sciences Department. And trustees, I know you already know this, but we plan to have a more personal event where we can host Mrs. Kelm in a luncheon where we can express our appreciation to her directly and more personally. We have been unable to do that because of the social distancing that we're under right now. But as soon as we can get back into the fall with an appropriate time, please know that we look forward to having that event with Mrs. Kelm present where you can thank her. So with that, trustees, I'd like to thank you for your service to Blinn, especially during these challenging times that we've been through. And with that, Chair Mosier, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? May
Yes,
I-
sir. You bet, Douglas.
Yes, I want to just follow up on what Dr. Hensley had to say about Eunice Kelm. This process began sometime last year, and back then I was very interested in what she was planning to offer, so I started taking some few notes back then, and I just want to share a few of those things with you. I drive by there occasionally, and hopefully in not too distant future, all of us board members will be able to go by and take a look at that property. What I found the last time I drove by there was Angus calves haltered, grazing in the green pasture. Now, well, I can tell you what we are getting is a testament to Eunice and the late Elwood of their love of the land and their love of animals. They were always involved very heavily with 4-H and FFA kids, and now this gift to Blinn College will be able to continue providing the needs for our Blinn Ag students. It is also somewhat ironic that we will be taking action to make this gift a reality tonight, because it would have been the 58th wedding anniversary of Eunice and Elwood. They were married in June 16th, 1962 at the Gay Hill Church, which is right next to her property. So Eunice, I know you're viewing tonight, and we sincerely thank you for your gift, and we look forward to our first tour. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Douglas, and thank you, Mrs. Kelm, and your family. That's such a great gift, and we will certainly hope to have the opportunity very soon to gather with you and celebrate this in a more personal way. So thank you so much. That brings us to our financial statement. Mr. Cervantes, you going to handle it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hensley, members of the board. The financial report that I'm presenting tonight is the report through May 2020, which is the 9th month of the fiscal year, which puts us 75% through our fiscal period. Our revenue total through May, almost $101 million. Our expenses are $83.5 million, and net is at $17.4 million. I'll try not to say this too often, but we also gave away or refunded back $3.3 million worth of refunds and auxiliaries, but obviously that had an impact on this. Statement of current operating changes in net position. The total revenues are just a little bit above where we were last year, despite that 3.2 million. So $650,000 to the good. Our expenditures, however, are also up $3 million. The bulk of that is the personnel increase, the 5% increase that we approved last year. The net increase in fund balance, there's our $17.4 million for this year compared to last year of 19.8, which puts us at $2.4 million less than what we had last year. Still very good for a period of time where we've had some challenges this year. $17 million to the plus is not a bad number at all. So our revenue comparison by source, for the most part, is pretty close to the same of where we were last year. Our auxiliary sales and services, the refunds obviously had an impact on that. Tuition and fees is up as a percentage. I think that's just a mathematical issue. Mathematical, for the most part, some of it's mathematical. Tuition and fees revenue, we budgeted $71 million. Right now through May, we had $63 million, which accounts for 88.3% of our budget. We certainly were higher last year in the 90% of our budget. We also budgeted $6 million this year, $6 million more this year for tuition and fees. Our tuition revenue is up $2.4 million. The bulk of that is in the out-of-district, as it is almost every year. $1.8 million of that 2.4 is coming from out-of-district. Our fee revenue is also up $1.4 million. The bulk of that is coming from the general fee. Workforce is down. We're going to look into that piece of it. We think there may be some logical reasons for that, but we haven't had a chance to explore it as much as we need to. Housing and food service revenue shows a budget of $11.2 million. Compared to that, to the actual revenue that we received of 8.2, is at 73.5. In the good year last year, we were at 90-something% of our budget, but because of circumstances, we're obviously less in revenue. Our auxiliary revenue is down $2.4 million. Every one of these categories is down. Of course, the large refunds in housing, food service, and parking all had significant, is the explanation for it. Our total expenses, the variance is $3 million. The bulk of that is in our salaries and benefits. I said earlier, the 5% is the biggest portion of that. But all the other categories are down. I think debt service and R&R expenses, exclude the E&G, is probably more to do with COVID, just slowing down our activity. The pie chart, $3 million are by category. Salaries and wages is the largest portion of that at 72%. Everything else is pretty much in line. When we compare that to the previous year, salary and benefits, you can see we're at 70%. So we've gone a little bit, we're up a little bit. I think that's partially because of the slowdown in some of these other areas, but also because of our 5% increase. Operating expense is up 3.2. This is just the operating expense. Same sort of thing. If you look at instruction, the $36.7 million that we had this year compared to 35. Instruction is going to have almost predominantly all of that is personnel expense. So when you have a 5% increase in there, that's what you're going to get. We've shown some interest, or the board has shown some interest in the money that's remaining from our 2016 monies. Right now we're showing we have $1.9 million left. If we have two major projects that looks like they're coming to an end. The Chancellor mentioned the Castone repair has $809,000 that we still have committed from the 2016 money. Hopefully we'll be spending that before the end of the year. And then you can see the commitment on the Bryan Science only has close to around $300,000 $600,000 of that left. We had $2.5 million of that committed from the remaining, or from the bond fund. So in terms of our May inflows and outflows, our student cash and refunds in May totaled up $5.6 million. Student financial aid drawdown from the Department of Education, $129,000. We received, on the right, you'll see we received $5.7 million in student payments. The next two items are the CARES Act funding and then the CARES grants to students. You'll note that $3.5 million is identical. So the money came in from the Department of Education and also went out in terms of in the form of grants to students. I'm told, just was told today, that that number continually is being worked, and right now I think we're about $4.2 million that has been spent out. Student refunds, $168,000. That's the normal refunds that college would have issued out. Other cash receipts, total of $3.1 million. Interest continues monthly to, even though it's really small percent right now, $136,000. Our state appropriation is the largest portion of the money that we receive from other cash receipts, $2.3 million. Grants and contracts, miscellaneous, that's mostly taxes, somewhere around $66,000. And we also reimbursed ourselves for capital expenditures that, from the funds, from the bond funds, over $500,000. Our uses of cash, payroll is the largest one, as it typically is, almost $6 million, and accounts payable is another $1.5 million. Should have said that's a total of $8.1 million cash use in May. When you summarize that, we received $5.6 million from students and other sources, another $3 million, but we spent $8.1 million. Our net increase to cash in May was $610,000, and that went to our local bank. That shows us, at the end of May, the unrestricted cash and cash equivalents was close to $96 million. We still are maintaining the 5-month reserve of $42.5, $8.5 million a month. We still have the almost $15.5 million in the deferred maintenance reserve. In the budget presentation that I'll make later, we're going to dip into that piece a little bit. The STEI, we have $3 million that we've set aside for of this money. I don't think we'll use the entire $3 million, but that's we'll leave it there for the moment until we see how that plays out. That will leave us unrestricted cash balance for other projects of somewhere around $35 million. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Sponge. We'll move along. That'll bring us to the institutional enrollment report for the May 2020 mini-semester and summer one session. Vice Chancellor Buck, is she on this? Okay.
Karen, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Lori. You guys hear me? Thank you, Chairman Mosier, Dr. Hensley, and Board of Trustee members. Next, Lori. Lori, next. There we go. As most of you know, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Blinn College was unable to hold its normal spring graduation ceremony this year, as has been done for many years. Therefore, Blinn's Communication and Marketing Department prepared a congratulatory video message for our spring graduates. Numerous administrators, faculty, and staff shared their messages with our graduates, and this video is available via social media or YouTube as noted on the slide. Indeed, we support all of our spring 2020 graduates, as we understand it was truly a trying semester for them, and we congratulate them on their perseverance and persistence in achieving their educational goals. Next slide. In terms of comparison data for our spring 2019 students versus spring 2020, this table shows a large increase for spring 2020 in our reverse transfer conferred degrees from the previous year, 648 to 46. Indeed, Blinn College began a process over 15 years ago that I entitled the Lost Graduates Project, where we looked at students in technical education who were working towards an AAS degree and found they had earned a technical certificate along the way, and we conferred these awards. This project was the impetus for what became the Reverse Transfer Project, where the college uses national clearinghouse data to substitute in courses that students have earned at four-year colleges and universities to be able to award them their associate's degree. 2019 was definitely a low year in terms of reverse transfer conferments, as Student Services was in the process of training a new individual to perform this task. However, we believe that upcoming years will see increases in both lost graduates and reverse transfer award conferment. In summary, the college's Spring 2020 award conferment exceeded Spring 2019 by 539 awards, either degrees or certificates. And with performance-based funding for these awards, this should result in approximately $121,000 of additional funding. Next slide. Speaking of performance-based funding, it's important to also draw your attention to the STEM awards for Spring 2020. These awards shown on this slide not only result in positive employment opportunities or transfer pathways for our graduates, but they contribute to increased performance-based funding for the college. Next slide. For example, for Spring 2020, these 170 STEM graduates from a variety of critical fields result in 2.25 points of performance-based funding for each. So as per my previous slide about award conferment and the performance-based funding that the college receives, this category is even more impactful. In real dollars, these 170 graduates generate over $86,000 in performance-based funding. And as the footnote on the previous slide and this slide indicate, we have both dental hygiene and veterinary technology students who will count in this critical field category with their August graduation. There are 23 more students who were unable to complete their clinical rotations or labs during the Spring 2020 pandemic semester, and they will contribute to this increased funding. Next. Next. As was noted in my May board meeting, enrollment data indicated that this term was trending towards a very successful Census Day with its start date of May 15th, and as Dr. Hensley noted in her presentation. Census on May 19th indicated it truly was a positive growth term with a headcount increase of approximately 15% over 2019, contact hours increasing 16%, and credit hours increasing 15%. Next. This positive enrollment trend has continued for Summer 1 2020. As per this table, headcount is currently almost 6% higher than 2019. Contact hours are over 17% higher, and credit hours are over 15% higher than Summer 1 2019. It should be noted that the census date for 5-week Summer 1 term has already occurred on June 8th. However, the census date for the 10-week Summer 1 term will occur later this week, so the numbers on this table may adjust slightly at that time. If I haven't always said and continue to remind you, I want everybody to understand that enrollment, the positive enrollments that you see are definitely a team effort. It's a team effort between marketing, academic affairs, and student services, and I'm proud to work with those in each of those areas that contribute to this. And lastly, although I do not have a slide for it, as Dr. Hensley mentioned, the Summer 2 semester, which begins on July 6th, is also starting to show very positive upward registration trend. And the expectation is that this semester will also exceed Summer 2 2019 in terms of headcount, credit hours, and contact hours. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Hensley, the reverse transfer that she mentioned up there, that 640 some, what benefit is that to Blinn College to do that?
Thank you for the question. Karen, come back on and you might want to add to what I will say. The question from Trustee Beaufort is, what benefit is it to Blinn to have reverse transfer students? Would you like to answer that? And I'll be glad to add on.
Sure. For reverse transfer, Mr. Beaufort, you get an extra performance-based funding point. So every award that we have, whether it's a certificate or a degree, we get additional funding. So when students graduate, or when students leave Blinn, if they haven't graduated with an award, by transferring back in credits from their four-year school, And if we can qualify them for a degree, then Blinn receives additional funding. And also, it's good for the students in terms of maybe sometimes they don't complete that four-year degree, but it shows them that they have completed an associate degree. And many times, students reach out to us and tell us how excited they are that we let them know that they actually qualify for this associate degree. And it gives them that impetus or that energy to continue on many times for that four-year degree.
Exactly. I would just underscore a couple of points. Certainly funding is beneficial directly to the college, but it's far beyond that. An individual then, I think I've told a few of you trustees this, when I encounter someone who says they went to A&M, for example, and they didn't complete, but they went to Blinn, I always ask them, did you get your associate's degree when you went to Blinn? And most times they'll say no, they didn't. They transferred ahead of time, and then I tell them about the reverse transfer, because oftentimes they will qualify subsequently for a degree from Blinn, and then they have that on their resume, and they have that as part of their life achievement goals, that they have received an associate's degree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the question, and particularly, I'm so pleased to see these numbers go up on reverse transfer. When I first came 5 years ago, those numbers were not what they are now, so we're delighted to see that emphasis.
Anything else?
I do. I've got a question.
sorry, excuse me.
Dr. Buck, we talked about summer 1 and summer 2, and I think the last time that we met, we talked about how we thought things may be looking for the fall, and I think we budgeted potentially a 20% enrollment decrease, but I'm just really curious about how things look like they're looking at this point for the fall semester.
Thank you. Karen, do you want to take it, or I will
Sure.
after you? Or you, I can
Trustee
go first.
Colbert, I
either way.
think fall is not showing the turnaround yet that we've seen for the other summer terms. Seems like students are taking their terms or semesters one at a time, and they're registering rather late, even for the May Mini and the Summer 1 and the Summer 2. We're hopeful to see some additional turnaround as we get students registered for Summer 2 and then start really focusing on fall. We have a lot of projects like the Back at Blinn project, a lot of videos that we're sharing with students, with prospective students, and advising. We've done a lot of things that are new and different for our students for fall in terms of simultaneous remote instruction that will go along with our classrooms. We have the 8-week classes that we're offering. So I think students right now are just a little uneasy as to understand everything that we have to offer, but it's definitely a real focus, and I think that it's going to come around and that registration is going to be there.
So, you know me, I give a direct answer to a direct question, so here's my direct answer. It's true, everything that Karen said is absolutely true. There's a tremendous amount of outreach that's occurring, but specifically for our fall right now, as to where we were in this point in time, this day and time, about a year ago, we're about 30% down. And for compared to census date, which is the 12th class day of the fall semester, we're still about 63% down. We are still recommending tonight, as you pass the budget, that we budget for a 20% down. And we're going to scurry around as fast as we can, as hard as we can, to keep those enrollments up. But I'm a realist, and so we have a long way to go. We're not there yet, but we are budgeting still and recommending tonight that we budget for the 20% reduction in enrollment. Now, when we first started talking about the enrollment reductions, we were down for summer and we were down for mini-mester. So it was particularly delightful to be able to share with you tonight that we did come from behind, and not only did we break even, but we came ahead. I would hope for that for the fall, but I'm still not optimistic that that's going to occur. I still believe that we will have a lessening of enrollment for the fall semester. And in my heart, I'm hoping that it's no more than 20%, but I'm also expecting that it could be worse than that. And so we're going to keep you completely informed as we go through. So in summary, Trustee Colcourt, we're hopeful for the fall. We're down about 30% as compared to where we were a year ago at this point in time for registration, and compared to census, about 63% down for census, so we have a significant way to go. And then finally, we are still recommending a 20% reduction on the budget for enrollment for tonight.
Any other questions? Okay, that takes us through our reports. And the consent items are considered to be routine by the Board of Trustees and enacted on one motion. you've been given these items ahead of time and had an opportunity to review them, I would entertain a motion that we approve the consent items.
I move we approve the consent items.
We have a motion from Mr. Gaywood. Do I have a second? We have a second from, who? From Mr. Wells, Reverend Wells. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The motion carries. Thank you. That brings us to item number 6 on our agenda, discussion and possible action items, the adoption of the budget and stipends for fiscal year 2020-2021. We've had several opportunities to review these numbers, both in the workshops and the meetings. So we'll be glad to hear them again from you. We're in good shape.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hensley, members of the board. The budget presentation we are going to show you tonight is a scaled-down version of the report that we presented at the board workshop in May. But there are some changes since the workshop, and I'll try to highlight those as we go through for your consideration. As usual, if there's any questions as we go through this, feel free to stop. So the key budget assumptions that we showed you back in last month are pretty much the same. We've talked about the second one, a budgeted enrollment at a 20% decrease. We still have that in the budget. But there are two items here that I wanted to bring to your attention. One of them is we have some early indications that there may not be any reductions in state appropriations. That's the good news. The bad news is when you ask people up in Austin, the response is, well, you might want to wait till see what the state controller report comes out, what it looks like in July, because all the revenue for the oil and gas and the tax receipts and things of that sort may not look as well, and then they may come back at us at a later date. So we're going to keep the 10% reduction in there just to be on the safe side. The other one is the estimated percent of health insurance rate increase. We had 2% in there at the workshop. We've now been told that there's not going to be any increases, so that's very positive for our staff and also for the college. So jumping right into the revenues, the $105 million that we had shown you back last month is still identical. There really hasn't been any changes to it. However, state appropriations, like I said, if it turns out that there are no cuts there, that would save us $2.5 million. That's what we've taken out of the budget. We wouldn't give you a revised budget, but our actuals would go up $2.5 million. So we're hopeful that actually does come to fruition. The other one I want to draw your attention to is the miscellaneous revenues. This is the area where we have put in our CARES money that we have forecasted at least for now. There is good reason to believe that number may go up. It may go up another $1.5 million of revenue coming in as we have expenditures in this year. So this has to do with some of the technology that we're going to be putting into the classroom sometime this summer. If we do that, we're going to ask for reimbursement on the federal government in the next fiscal year. People talked about the enrollment information. I think Karen strategically placed herself in front of me so she'd steal my thunder this time. But what I was trying to show you to the difference just between the workshop. Look at that middle column. For summer one, we had said that there was 4497. That was 1 month ago, and now as of yesterday, it was 6,800. Which shows us, for summer one, shows a 10% increase. That's on the head count. This was yesterday's number, so it may vary from what Karen had indicated to you. Summer two, same thing. We had 2,047 1 month ago, and now we're at 3,397, down a little bit, but still not 20%. So this is all very positive for us. I'm not going to make any predictions on the fall, as the Chancellor wisely did also. Right now we're at 31% down. But I think as we get closer to the semester, that number is going to look positive or move closer to where we would like it to be then, similar to what we've experienced with summer one and summer two. on the expense side, we're not asking for too much changes here. The 101,110 that you see on the bottom there is very close to what we had shown you before. I think it's about $100,000 less, and that's because of the fringe benefits. So this is the overall budget, just jumping right into it, Mr. Chairman, where it shows here's all of the revenue, here's all the expenses. The big item that we talked about last time that I still want to draw to your attention is that this item here, that we're not budgeting anything for contingencies, we're not budgeting anything for replacements and renovations. And those are going to be, especially the R&R, not especially, the R&R is going to be moved to where we want to budget that out of our reserves. The other item, what I want to draw your attention to, is this, where we're going to have to use some of our reserves for operational deficits that we're forecasting if we have the 20% decrease in enrollment. There's good reason to believe we won't need that. I mean, if we get 2.5 back from the state where they don't cut our budget, if we're able to get some more CARES money, 1.25, that's going to speak to about maybe $1 million that we might have to jump into the reserves, and that's if the enrollment comes in somewhere around 20%. If it comes in less than that, we won't need it at all. I think we'll come out in the positive. I want to be optimistic and say if it's significantly less than 20%, there's a good chance we're going to add to our fund balance. That's always a very positive thing. So we're going to ask you today, here's the capital projects, deferred maintenance, there's the other $3 million that now we want to take it all out of reserves. So we have two items. We have the $3 million that we're going to ask to be to use for reserves, and potentially $4.6 million of operations also. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes the presentation. I'll stand for any questions.
Anyone have any questions regarding the budget that's been presented for the coming year? And ladies and gentlemen, we need to take action to approve the adoption of the budget and the stipends for the fiscal year coming up. Do I have a motion? We have a motion from Dr. Krausen. Do I have a second? We have a second from Mrs. Bain. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Good job by you and all your staff. Okay, the authorization to request approval to proceed with design of and request proposals for construction manager at Risk Services for the Rellis Phase 2 building at the Blinn Rellis campus. Mr. Cervantes, you going to present that?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to start off just introducing it. The agenda item is an update on the Gensler Architect programming that the board approved last February. Mr. Feldhake actually is going to start off and provide some information about the programming information, and then I will conclude with the details on financing the project. So, Mr. Feldhake, if you would come to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Mosier, Dr. Hensley, members of the board. It's my pleasure to present to you this agenda item 6B, where we are requesting authorization for approval to proceed with the design of and request proposals for construction manager at-risk services for the Rellis Phase 2 building on the Blinn Rellis campus. And I've got a presentation that I will start off here to show you where we're at on the program. So the initial slide I'm going to show you is just a reminder of some of the information that we presented last fall. And some of that information is that we are currently having enrollment challenges on the Rellis campus. With the Schwartz building being at or near capacity, I've got some utilization information that our designers put together that I'll show you shortly. We also occupy some space in the Academic Alliance building. Again, the utilization in the Schwartz building we'll talk about shortly. We have the focus on the next TMA, the A&M systems building being in the engineering labs and not necessarily the classrooms, as well as extensive recruiting activities going on at the RELIS Alliance. So these are all enrollment challenges that we're foreseeing on the campus. Another reminder is just looking at our other Brazos County campus, the Bryan campus, and a reminder of where we're at on capacity, and the 9,400 student range is where we feel the capacity is, and those two pictures on the bottom are what it looks like whenever that capacity begins to grow and get up there. We have the students sitting on the floor in the lines of cars, so we feel like we've right-sized the Bryan campus. As we got into working with Gensler, which was a very interesting experience, you can see the beginning date there, that item number 1. We started working with them right as this whole COVID quarantine took effect. So it's been an interesting procedure to go through this type of programming in this unique environment. But you can see we've had several meetings with Gensler throughout the time. We've had a steering committee made up of Blinn leadership. We've had campus deans, academic deans involved, and various user groups involved throughout this process. And all that culminated there that last May 18th through the 22nd. We had a final meeting where we began looking over the final program, which we're presenting information to you today. This information is utilization, and this is it's a bit of a blurry slide to have, but I'm going to walk you through some of the utilization that we looked at in the Schwartz building. So we looked at 2 areas of utilization. The top chart is the utilization of our classrooms. The bottom chart is the utilization of our labs. And so the first area I want to point out to you, this is the coordinating board's recommendations, and that is that you fill a classroom to 66% and that you use it for 38 hours a week. And so that's the target we're trying to reach. This first column that we have here shows that we are filling our classrooms on average, that top line is on average over 80% filled. Some of those are higher, but generally we are around that 66% fill or much over. We're also using our classrooms over 40 hours a week, which we're exceeding the coordinating board's recommendation there. So whenever our programmers averaged all that out, the target percentage that you're trying to find is 75%. Whenever you hit that 75% mark, that's a key indicator to say it's time to start thinking of something. And as you can see, our average for the classrooms at the RELIS campus is over that 75%. So this is a key indicator that we need to start thinking of something. You may notice there the 2 bottom rooms there. They're a bit of an anomaly. That bottom room is the large meeting space, which is kind of a dual purpose room, and as part of this programming, we're looking to relieve that so that we can not have that anomaly in the RELIS building and the Schwartz building right now. The other area we looked at was lab utilization. We wanted to check that and see how it was going. The utilization for labs is a little bit different. They expect it to be filled a little bit higher. They expect the lab to be filled to about 75% capacity, but used less. They expect it to be used about 25 hours a week. It's just the nature of labs. So you can see in a lab, we're not quite filling them the same that we're filling our classrooms. We're a little bit under that 75% fill capacity that they're looking for in a lab. There are some labs that are filling up, but for the most part, we're staying under the fill capacity. We're also not quite using those labs to 25 hours a week. We're only averaging about 20 hours a week in the labs, which gives us the overall, we're not quite hitting that 75% mark on our labs. You can see that we do have 2 labs that are over that. Those are 2 of our chemistry labs on the 4th floor, but the unique thing is we have 2 similarly designed chemistry labs on the 3rd floor, an organic chemistry and a microbiology lab. We initially had some discussions with Dr. Busicki, and they're going to begin looking at ways that they can shift some of those classes around into some of those other lab spaces and relieve some of that utilization on that then 4th floor or chemistry labs. So we feel that we have a solution there. So what have we programmed into this new building? What we've begun looking at, 22% of the space we're looking at as a common space. We're looking at this as a main building for the campus, for Blinn's campus. So we would have, within that common space, we're going to have a main lobby, a large meeting room, and that would relieve the meeting room space that we have in the Schwartz building and allow that to be used for classrooms. We would also have an esports arena for our esports program that we're developing, as well as a students' common space for students to be able to gather. 15% of the building is in student services, So we are looking to bring some of the services that we currently have at the Tejas Center and bring that out to the Rellis campus. So that's easier service for the students. That's going to have a welcome center as well as a testing center for students wanting to come out to Blinn and out to Rellis. We're also going to have some administrative space, which is going to include faculty offices for the faculty that we're going to need out there for these classrooms, as well as campus administration. We're going to have general instruction space. 37% of this building is going to be general instruction. We're looking at having 20 classrooms that are 36 seats out on the classroom. So that is where you see that we're helping that utilization, how we're exceeding our utilization on classroom space. We're providing classrooms. And we're also looking at about 9% of this building being some specialized teaching labs for the engineering tech program, computer science, and IT lab. So our architects, not only as part of laying this out and giving us some of the other numbers, they've started doing some stacking and blocking diagrams. One thing I want to tell you is these are very conceptual. These are not the final design, so this is just the architect's recommendation at this point. If the board were to approve, these designs would be more refined and that the building might not look exactly the way it's presented now. But within the stacking diagram, you can see it's a 3-story building. It's about 75,000 square foot is what they're programming right now. And I'm going to show you some floor plans to give you an idea of what some of these spaces are. So on the first floor, you can see it's an L-shaped building. In this bottom right-hand quadrant, that's where the entry would be off of that open lobby, kind of in the crook of the L. That's the entryway. There's going to be a stair in that area. And that open lobby then opens up to the one-stop welcome center. It's also adjacent to student services, the testing reception, as well as the admissions testing area. Along this would wind up being the west wall of the building facing back towards Blinn's parking lot. This is where you're going to have your engineering labs, your IT lab, your computer science lab, and some classrooms. And then we're also looking at, in that left-hand corner, the student lounge. There's going to be a micro market that helps us with feeding some of the students on the campus, as well as the esports arena. On the second floor, this is predominantly classroom space, but again, you can see in that bottom right-hand corner, we'll have an atrium that overlooks the first floor, some open study space. We've got several classrooms in this area. Along the west wall of the building, more classrooms. And again, we've got some more student study spaces, some meeting rooms, and classroom space to finish up the second floor.
Is that services?
The services, the gray boxes in the middle, those are the general services, mechanical rooms, toilets, elevators, things like that. And then on the third floor, again, starting in that bottom right-hand corner, this is a suite for campus administration. We've got some open study space, some stairs, a couple more classrooms to finish up on the third floor. This is also where we're going to have the faculty suite. So we'll have faculty spaces, adjunct faculty, and those M's, those are the small meeting rooms that our faculty like to use to meet with the students so that they can go in and meet with those small groups of students. And then we also have a large meeting room with a pre-function space for a warming kitchen, a serving area, as well as an open terrace that opens off of that meeting space to provide more meeting opportunities for the campus. As far as what the look, as the architect has looked at this is a kind of an overall campus view that the architect looked at to orient you. This is the Schwartz building. This is the Academic Alliance building. And of course, you can see the large A&M's large parking lot that they have. If you'll notice, there's kind of a CL, a center line. One of the things we noticed whenever we started looking at this is that we have a unique opportunity in that when students begin to drive onto campus, that drive presents a frame for our building. So when a student begins to drive through that parking lot, the first thing they would see would be our building. So that was a very unique opportunity that we found whenever we began placing this. And we're looking at putting the building just north of the Schwartz building. As we begin looking a little closer as to what this building could look like, again, this is a blocking diagram, just showing us what the potential is here. You can see that the architects are envisioning a circle drive with a few parking spaces for dignitaries, for some students who are there to register for pickup and drop off. A nice little element we're looking at there, and that would open up into a plaza. You can also see the connectivity of the sidewalks on campus, bringing students back and forth between the Schwartz building and this new building. You can see our terrace area that would then face to the south, giving nice shade, so it could be an all-season terrace. And another nice feature that you'll see in one of the upcoming renderings or images is a tower element right at the entryway that's going to help students as they see this. This is going to be the main building for Blinn, and it's going to really draw their eye as they come down that drive. So this is that image I was talking about. If you're a student coming to the campus for the first time, you're coming through this drive, this is where you park. Blinn's building is right in front of you. It's a unique opportunity to have that kind of a visual. So the architects then cleaned up those block diagrams and they gave us a rendering to just give us an idea. Again, this is conceptual. This isn't saying the building will finally look like that, but this is an idea. You can see we're staying within the RELIS master plan, the red brick, the white stone that we've got that ties it in with the RELIS building, and of course the green mansard roof that brings it throughout the campus. Another view that just kind of helps you show the relationship between the Schwartz building and this new building, with the circle drive, the terrace on top, as well as the tower element. Now, as far as the budget, the architects have worked with us and we've developed a budget. As we looked at this, again, this is about a 75,000 square foot, 3-story building. The architects have looked at it on a cost per square foot basis and provided some contingency. It's important you provide that at this level. So we're looking at a construction cost that's about $25.6 million. And then, of course, you've got your professional fees, testing, other soft costs, your FF&E in there. And so when we look at this all together, this is about a $32.25 million project for this building. The architects have also looked at a schedule, and of course, if the board were to approve, that would kick in the next portion of the schedule where we would extend Ginsler's contract, and we would then go solicit for a construction manager at risk. What we would look at is if the board were to approve, we could come back to the board in the August time frame with a construction manager at risk. We would then be looking at bringing a GMP to the board or a guaranteed maximum price sometime in the early winter. For the February time frame is what we're targeting, all in anticipation that we could begin classes in August of 2022. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Cervantes so we can talk about the funding.
Mr. Chairman, if there's somebody that would like to ask Mark a question before we get into the financial side.
I've got a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
What is the total student capacity of that building?
The capacity is a unique number because it really depends on how many full-time and how many part-time students. So that's a difficult thing to say. But we feel that it will be able to double our numbers on campus. So right now we're at about 2,500 students. Our designers feel that we should be able to go up to about 5,000 with that.
And the second question, which you probably won't be able to answer, but is it anticipated that any of those students will be displaced from the Bryan campus over to this new facility?
I don't know that I would be able to answer that, sir.
You mentioned earlier something about 9,400 is the capacity at the Bryan campus. Do we have more than that students there now, or is that the existing number?
That was a number that one of our consultants helped us to establish, and so it's a unique way of getting that. It's got to do with the number of seats you have, the fill capacity, full-time hours. It's the number they came up with our capacity for the Bryan campus was about 9,400 students.
And what was our enrollment there last? No, what was our enrollment at the Bryan campus?
Bryan campus. Karen, 9,000, what, for the fall? Can you come on, please?
I believe it was close to 10,000. We've been as high as 13,000, but I think the last fall it was close to 10,000.
And one other question, I was intrigued by that outdoor terrace.
Yes, sir.
The question is that should we have to grow the classroom space and everything, will it be so designed that could potentially be enclosed in the classrooms?
We would need to let the architects know ahead of time that would be a thought, because there could be some elements that we need to include in the mechanical systems, but we could certainly bring that up as an option that way we could plan for any growth.
We talked about that too, Trustee Bohart, so we'll definitely look at that.
And one other question, might not be for you, but I heard you mention something about transferring some student services from the Tejas Center over to this facility. So when you do that, will they be taking away those services at Tejas, or will they be staffing required for that?
Sure, thank you. No new staff are anticipated because we're in a loosely defined freeze right now, so we're not planning on hiring new staff for the next year and possibly even beyond one more year. The plan tentatively, as we've discussed with the trustees, is that Leighton Schubert was able to negotiate an extension on our lease for the Tejas Center, one that we can exit out of at the time that we feel is appropriate and needed for Blinn. We will keep a Tejas presence, but some of the staff will move to Rellis into this facility. We would still need Tejas for a number of years, but eventually when we put student services onto the Bryan campus, then that's the time when we would exit out of the Tejas Center. So the short answer again, Trustee Bohart, is some staff would come from Tejas to Rellis. And
So there
work
will be some duplication of
We'd
services.
still keep Tejas because our Bryan campus doesn't have student services there. They would still primarily use Tejas.
But the long goal is to have student services at the Rellis campus and at the Bryan campus.
Exactly.
Not at Tejas.
That is correct. Our long-term goal is to exit out of Tejas completely. And that's why it was so important that Leighton was able to renegotiate that lease so that it would give us that option in the future.
You have them on the third floor.
On student services,
Where are they located?
They're on the first floor,
First
right
floor.
off the lobby.
I think I'm through.
great questions, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Looks like open.
That's open. So there would be a wall around it, similar to what we have on the Schwartz building, just enough so you're not feeling like you're falling off the edge. And then there would be a roof over it all with obviously structure holding up the roof. So the idea of enclosing it is a possibility, but there are a few elements that we have to think of ahead of time with the mechanical system, with egress, with things like that. That way we don't design ourselves into a corner.
Earlier in the presentation, you said that supporting group applications.
I don't know that I don't have that information. I don't know if the coordinating board has changed that number. That was before COVID.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we have a authorization to request approval to proceed with design and/or request proposals for construction manager.
Yeah, let
Oh,
me-
I'm sorry. Oh, you gotta tell us how we're gonna pay for this bugger.
You
I
can
prefer-
vote now, sir, if you'd like.
Mr. Chairman, I prefer we
I've
skip
talked to
his
you so
anyway.
much about it. I've wore myself out talking to you about it, so that's the reason I've already forgotten about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hensley, members of the board. The question on the table is how we're going to pay for $32.24 million. And I wish I could come out directly and say it right now. Unfortunately, COVID has also created havoc on the bond market. It's starting to come around. The interest rates actually look very intriguing, but that's only for the last couple of weeks. And so there really isn't a history there that we can look at to make it dependable. And then the other piece of that is how the rating companies will evaluate us. And because there's some uncertainty associated with the enrollment, which is one of the key areas that they look at, we're fearful of how they might respond to us if we were to try to go out now. So the short answer is that we want to borrow some money and we want to use some of our reserves. What we put here is somewhere between $10 and $20 million that we would borrow. We're not asking the board to weigh in on that tonight, but what we're thinking is we're going to keep an eye on the interest rates, see how they go, and there's also a plan to come back to the BIF back in August and see if we could start to come back to make some sense of where we're going to move forward with this. So let me go through this very quickly. This is very similar to what we showed the board back in January of how we would make our decisions when it came to these sort of projects. We're going to look at our unrestricted cash balances, so we've updated that. I talked a little bit already about the trend for possibly being able to replenish those cash balances. Looks like next year may not be one of the best years to do that, but it still may work out in our favor. And we're going to talk a little bit about the capital projects that are under consideration, both current and future. Some of that's changed since when the last time we spoke. So our unrestricted cash and equivalents, the column to the second from the right, the May 20th, is where we are right now, $96 million. The red August fiscal year 20 is where we think we're going to end up, somewhere around $99 million by the end of the fiscal year. If you look all the way back to fiscal year 14, you would see our fund balances back then were $37 million. When I joined the operation back in end of fiscal year 17, there were $65 million. It's moved up quite a bit, due in large part to this body, also due to the administration and the employees that put in a great deal of effort to be able to make this all worthwhile. If we look at the money that we invested out of our last bonds, the fiscal year 16, when we received all that money, it really turned out to be to our advantage. Some major projects came out of that money. So let me jump to where's the money, the $99 million, what's spoken for, and what do we see coming down the pike? Well, we still have enough money for our 5 months operating reserve, our capital and deferred maintenance. I talked about taking $3 million of that, setting that aside for R&R budget, so that's the next item there. We've already committed $3 million for the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Innovation Building. Hopefully we won't need all of that, but we're going to leave that as a placeholder for now. We talked about the budget for operations, $4.6 million that we're going to earmark for that. We're hopeful that we won't need but maybe $1 million of that, and there's a good chance that maybe we don't need any of it. But if all that is still going, just looking at that, we still would have $33 million available for projects and not touching some of these other areas. And we're optimistic that number may grow. I showed this slide last time, but we showed you fiscal year 18. We've updated to fiscal year 19. The number at the top is the number of days that Blinn has in this tool that we use that compares us to other institutions around the country, universities and community colleges. Blinn is 290 days of operating cash on hand. That puts us at the 92nd percentile. If you look at it doesn't show up real clear there, but that 103 days is pretty close to the middle. That's the median. We're way, that would be $25.5 million for us. We're way past that. We're almost 4 times that amount. And then I plugged in what would happen if we didn't borrow anything at all, if we used all of the reserves. That would drop us down from 290 days to 185 days, still above the 75th percentile, so we still have a lot of cash. If we borrowed $10 million, or saved $10 million on our reserves, that would move us from 290 to 221 days. And then if we borrowed the $20 million, that would push us to 257 days, pretty close to the 290. I think that's at the 85th percentile. These are some of the current projects. We didn't know at the time, Mr. Chairman, that when we showed you this back in January, what the impact would be, or what the cost of some of these projects would be. We know now the science and technology is coming in at $35.5 million. This one we just heard is 32.2. Master plan you approved. It's right now we have an expense out there for $800,000 that we're going to take out of this money. Doesn't look like we're going to have any capital on the P3. You're going to speak later about some of one of the athletic facilities. The key that we still don't know is those unforeseen projects, especially those that are going to come out of the master plan. So we just need to be mindful of those. How much debt do we have right now? Well, at the end of fiscal year 20, we should show somewhere around $99 million. This shows what would happen if fiscal year 21, if we borrowed $10 million. That's the column on the right. Of course, it would go up to $115 million if we borrowed 20. If we borrowed 30, go in another $10 million higher. This one's a little bit busy, but it's one that you've seen before, so I'm going to go through it a little slowly. So the blue columns are our debt service on an annual basis. And the red column is what our debt service would be if we borrowed $10 million. The green is if we borrowed 20, and the purple is if we borrowed $30 million. And then the arrows to the left with those three colors are trying to provide some indication of what would happen to our one of the key areas that we look at is what is your debt service as a percentage of your revenue. So for every dollar that you bring in revenue, what percentage are you going to use to go out there and borrow? So if we borrowed at the $10 million rate, we would be at 6.6. If we borrowed at the $20 million, we would be right at 7. And then at the option 3, the 30 million would take us into the 7.5. Now that's using the same 3% that we were able to get. We thought that was a good number back then, but now the rates are lower, so that all of these would shift a little bit down depending on what we ultimately would receive. Here's our history of what we've been able to, a debt service as a percentage of our gross revenue. All the way back fiscal year 11, we were 6.4. Historically, we've been below 7. We've been as low as 5%. Look at fiscal year 21, second column from the right. It's at 8.1%. That's because of the dismal budget that we just approved. And we're hopeful that those revenues come in a lot higher, which would cause that percentage to go down dramatically. But we are budgeted for that. And we have the funds to be able to pay that debt service without a problem. Fiscal year 22 is saying what happens if things go back to normal, which we believe they will. That would put us back at 6.6. I wanted to show you this. We talked to Mr. Bohart a little bit about this before the meeting. We talked about the 2009 bond series that you don't see up here anymore. It was in the last presentation. It's rolled off. We made that last payment back in October of 2019. 2010, we still plan on bringing forward to the board a refinancing. Look at the column, the current outstanding debt for 2010, $17.6 million. And look at the refinancing, $16 million is what you would pay after we refinance that. You'd save $1.6 million. We're looking at rates right now that might go as much as saving as much as $2 million. So we're optimistic that we might even be able to get a better rate than what we showed you back then. One of the areas that we're always mindful is the current bond ratings. We have A1 with Moody's and Standard & Poor's. We have an A. The top 3 factors that the rating companies look at are enrollment trends, liquidity, and debt obligations. So our enrollment trends right now, there's some uncertainty associated with them. They don't know what's going to happen in the fall. Until we get closer to be able to provide some reasonable forecast, they may ding us on that. Liquidity, I've just showed you, is really high. We're in good shape, so I don't see any issues there, even if we use the money. The debt obligations might cause them a little bit of heartburn. I don't know how they would respond if we go from, let's borrow $30 million. I don't know how they would respond. I showed you this in January, but we've added a little bit of twist to it. So right now, this is a report that we receive. It's a financial report that we receive from the state that they put together, the coordinating board puts together after we send them our financial information. Of the 50 community colleges in the state of Texas, there are roughly around a handful of them that are below that standard 2, which is that brown line that you see right across. That's the standard that the state expects, that you would have that minimum standard that they expect. You see back in fiscal year 11, we dipped below that. Not real sure why, haven't looked into it. But ever since then, we've been above that standard. Right now, in fiscal year 20, I'm not going to talk about the 2 on the right because those are forecasts. We're at 3.9 is our index. So if we, now I'm going to introduce the 3 variables that we've added to this slide. What if we borrowed $10 million That's the red. That's the red arrow. We would dip down below 4. It's probably going to be like 3.8 or something like that. A little less than what we are right now. If we borrow $20 million, that's going to dip you below the 3%, 3% or 3.00. And then if you borrow 30, you're getting closer to that standard. And the standard is there, and what happens with those 5 entities that are on there, they're on a watch list. And Blinn does not want to be on the watch list. We don't want to be on a financial watch list for the state. So I don't want to say we'll do everything we can, because some of those people have legitimate reasons for being there. But for us right now, I don't think that would be a good barometer that we would want to. It's not a benchmark we want to hit. Opportunity cost is something that we look at when we borrow money. Right now, our rates that we are, I won't say enjoying, they're dismal. 0.5% is what we're receiving on money that we're investing right now. So that means for every $1 million that we have invested, we're only making $4,900. If we were to invest the whole amount, or I'm just going to use $30 million because it's easier to do the math, that would be $150,000 a year that we would forego. On the other hand, the bottom one shows, and we gave a fairly decent rate, 2.3, which is considerably less than the 3 that we have right now. We would pay $23,000. Multiply that times the 30 years, and you're looking at 690 or something like that. So quite a bit of difference between the two. So our part of what we look at when we decide whether or not we have enough money or which way we're going to choose, we look at this sort of stuff as one of the items. There are a number of them, as I've showed you tonight. So essentially we have three options as we see it. One is to issue about $10 million in bonds and use $22.3 million in reserves. Again, we're not making this decision tonight. Issue $20 million in bonds and use 12 less money in reserves, and then issue 30. What we're suggesting is that the administration does not like this last option because, one, it takes us close to that CFI that we're trying to avoid. 2, we don't know how the rating agencies might respond to it. 3, the debt service associated with that takes us over our threshold of 7. So there's a number of reasons why we're not fond of that number. Now, there's a whole host of reasons why people borrow money and don't borrow money. And things are changing as we speak. If that 2.3 comes in at 2.3, it caused me to reconsider, well, maybe we need to look at that a little bit. That's something we may not be able to get somewhere down the line. So as we approach a decision on this, I'm hoping that we can make a decision sometime this summer, certainly in the fall, as the bond rates stabilize, the bond market stabilize, and as soon as we have some information from our enrollment that we can hang our hat on. The last item that I want to talk about is the timing of the bond issue. For the reasons that you saw earlier, is that we're trying to keep that debt service as a percentage of our gross revenue down. If we borrow the money, we expect that we would borrow it in 2021, next fiscal year, but the debt services we would structure to be in the following year when things start looking hopefully a lot rosier for us in terms of revenue and all those sort of things. So I'll stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Questions?
I just thought of one other thing, other than what I visited with you earlier. Your analogy where it was 6.6% of revenue, 7.0% of revenue, and 7.5% of revenue. That's of the current year's revenue. You're saying we're going to allocate that much toward the indebtedness payments. Is that correct? Well, you showed that at 6.6%, 7%, and 7.5% of revenue, somewhere back there. Yes. I mean, that's based off of you're applying that amount of your current year's revenue toward the payment of all bonds. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah. So, and we've really rather be back to some of that age you had back there earlier. You feel more comfortable with the 6.6 or whatever that was?
The part that I
Yeah, that.
yeah, part of what I look at, and I said this to you privately, that I'm no different than a lot of other people, and I look at things where people have gone down a trail and they haven't been eaten by any monsters or anything. I like that trail. That's safer to me. I start deviating, getting out into the jungle and doing things different. I think it makes us more vulnerable. So I'm not saying I don't go there, because I don't mind getting to the jungle if there's riches out there that we might be able to enjoy. So I'll go. It's a horrible analogy, but I make those strategic choices when it absolutely looks like a win for the college and that we're willing to take that risk. But for the most part, I try to stay within this confine.
How do you factor in, because I just started factoring in the fact that, well, if you get up there at 9% or some other number like that, but you have all these excess cash reserves that can be used to make that payment. So it doesn't really, it's not really the same comparison, because back there in 2011, we didn't have all that excess cash to potentially make that payment. Now we have considerable excess cash to be able to make those types of payments. I just thought about it a while ago when you
Yeah, philosophically, it opens up a debate, in my mind anyway, of what do you use your reserves for? And I'm mindful of, as I heard the Chancellor express earlier, we don't want to use our reserves. I'm using operational money next year. We're planning on it. We're budgeting for it. But I don't want to use that. I don't want to use those reserves up. I want to keep them and use them for those rainy day or for things that we absolutely need. This one is strategic, and going back to the CFI index that we showed. Looking at our national association and some of the barometers they use to make judgments on when you will make a solid investment. They call it a strategic investment. Right now, where we're at in terms of our CFI, they are actually telling you should go out there and reinvest strategically so that you can use that money using reserves. They're telling us to use our reserves.
I bet they won't send you a letter stating that.
They're not going to say that, but they're saying you're high. They're saying you're high.
Let's see if we have other questions. I'm not trying to cut it short, but let's see if we can, anybody else have it. As I understand now, we don't have to make this decision on how this combination of financing is done tonight for this project.
Yes, sir. If I could just draw one, there's one item. You are approving Gensler and the college's ability to go out there and continue on with that contract. And so part of that budget, we need that seed money to be able to do that. But it will be small compared to the $32.2 million. So I'm saying that allow us to use the reserves for that small amount. I can almost guarantee you, Mr. Chairman, that of that $32 million, it's going to be less than $2 million by the December.
Yeah, the total 32 million is what I'm talking. We don't need to determine what faction that is.
Correct. Is that, Dr. Hensley, is that your?
Chair Mosier is absolutely correct. We are not determining on how much from reserves and how much for bond we're discussing tonight. We will begin those conversations in August, and we will take it to the Budget Committee first. They'll come through with a recommendation, and we'll bring that back to the full board.
But we are going to be spending some money to get the projects.
Specifically, if you look at the agenda item, what we're asking for tonight is to request approval to proceed with the design of, that means with Gensler proceeding on their contracted extended, and request proposals for the construction manager at risk services for the Rellis Phase 2 building on the Blinn Rellis campus, with the understanding that when we extend the contract with Gensler, there is some cost to that, which we anticipate would be $2 million or less approximately.
Mr. Chairman.
Did Gensler do the other building?
Did Gensler do the other
Gensler-
building? Mark, somebody? I don't recall, actually.
Are you meaning the Schwartz building?
Yes.
No, that was Kirksey Architecture.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
We do. Before we take the motion, let me suggest,
I have one observation, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
yes.
In August, when we consider it, do we think we'll be closer to the enrollment numbers for the fall?
Absolutely. We'll have 2 months of registration, so we will know. We'll have a pretty good idea on our enrollment about the second week of August, which would be prior to our typical third week, Tuesday of the month. It will not, however, be our final enrollment. It'll just be closer than estimate than where we are tonight, for sure. Thank you, Trustee Wells. Appreciate it.
We do need a motion to do for this, but I think what I'd like to recommend to the board is that I'd like to get the budget committee together to have them meet with the staff and come back with some firm recommendation, maybe some more firmer recommendation on how to get this permanent financing, or what percentage we need to borrow or not, that sort of thing.
So we absolutely will do that, and we'll take it to the budget committee.
But you're right. I mean, we need to get a motion to get this project.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Mr. Coco. We had a motion from Mr. Bohart and a second from Mr. Cocors. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item C of under 6, the authorization to seek qualifications for architectural services and seek proposals for construction manager and of risk services related to the dryer field upgrades at Blinn College campus. Mr. Swanee, you're going to kick that off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hensley, members of the board. Mr. O'Malley is going to make this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Moser, Dr. Hensley, members of the board, and thank you for your support on the Rellis project. This agenda item is seeking qualifications for architectural services and a proposal for construction manager risk for upgrades to the dryer field. We employed the services of Plan North, a local architectural firm, Katie Birch, to help us do some comprehensive programming at dryer field to see what help us with the needed upgrades in that facility. That programming included additional locker space, renovating the existing locker space, looking at the, I'm scrolling, I'm sorry. Can't do two things at one time. I'm sorry. We looked at some of the existing conditions of the space. This would be in the existing locker room, and the need, we're very crammed in this space. It's, we've got 20, this was built for a roster of about 25 to 28 baseball players. We have 42 now. And so anyway, her programming looked at how we address the existing space, the need for additional space, the concession stands, the public restrooms, the press box, the outfield fencing, the stadium seating, and the security. And I've got pictures of a lot of that here. You'll see some storage space here that we have to store things in the hallway because of the crowded area that we're in now. This is just a picture from the field itself showing the seating that needs to be looked at. And this is the existing dugout, which needs to be expanded, and this is also represents the storage issues that we have, needing to store some of our field equipment into the dugout when we're not using it. So, in regards to the additional, the new locker room space, we got two concepts from Plan North. Concept one is showing a new locker room that is this location right here. So it would be not a part of the building, but further down the third base line, if you will, towards the left field wall, is where this locker room would be located, and it would replace, or it would displace rather, the existing batting, pardon me, the pitching area, the bullpen area. Thank you, Mr. Cocos. Displace the existing bullpen area. So this is concept one, and we talked about this in our team with the athletic director, the baseball coach, in our little committee that reviewed the programming. And we really preferred concept two, which is another layout that Ms. Birch came up with. This one actually puts the locker room right in line with the existing structure. So it would really lend itself architecturally and functionally real well with being the adjacencies that it would provide. So it would be right above the dugout, if you will. This is where the dugout is located now. It would stay the same, be expanded some. But the dugout would be at this location. The new locker room would be above that on the same level as the existing locker room. And then we'd have some storage underneath this facility for our tractors and mowers and the type of stuff we need to keep maintaining the field. Okay, now the fun part, talking about the budget. The overall comprehensive programming, taking into account all the needs out there at the facility, Ms. Birch estimated that costed about $5.6 million to do everything. We felt like that was a little bit bigger bite than we wanted to take off at this time, a little bit larger project than we needed. We felt like we should scale that down. And so what we're asking for tonight is approval to spend $2.5 million and address the new locker room needs that are required on the space. So we'd enter into a project with a design firm, the construction manager at risk. We would take into account concept two. It's the program now would have to be obviously designed and then move forward with a project of $2.5 million. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions?
That might be something we can look at. Yes, sir. Right. That's something we certainly look at in design. Yes, sir.
Patio?
Yes, it does. It does have a
I mean,
patio.
basically, that would be for spectator seating.
Spectator
behind it.
seating up
Really,
there.
basically right over the top of the dugout.
Over the top of the dugout. Yes, sir. Exactly.
You have to put a net there in front of it, though. right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I thought it was neat. I thought that's what it was.
Yes, sir.
Richard, have y'all broken that out now, what we'd be talking about for this initial number, for this 2.5?
The 2.5 would include just this structure right here.
Okay.
Does that also include, though, the renovation of the existing coaches' offices and stuff?
Not unless the funds are there in the budget to pay for that. The first emphasis would be on the new locker room, and then we would try to take on as many of these other items that we can within the $2.5 million, because all of these are needed in time. All the different amenities. I talked about the restrooms, the concession stand, the renovation of the existing locker room. All that space needs to be looked at.
I thought somebody had said the wall.
Oh,
The outfield wall?
The outfield wall, it's got some issues as well.
So that's not in here, though.
It's not in the $2.5 million, no, sir. It is not. Again, the list for the $2.5 million would include the new locker room first, and then we would more than likely look at some of the needs in the existing stadium itself, either the seating, the concession, the restrooms, or the existing locker room.
So I'm curious about something, Richard. We might have talked about this at the other meeting in regard to the actual design of the locker room facility. Is it possible, from a programming perspective, for you guys to give an anticipated budget to the designer and say, look, we'd like to spend $1.5 million
Yes.
or $1 billion, or whatever the number comes to, that would help us to do some of these other things that are also pretty important, like the drainage in the outfield. I know that's an issue that they've dealt with for a while, and the outfield. I just think we need to get the absolute most we can out of $2.5 million.
Correct, and that'll be our goal to do that. I don't think we can get the entire list to $2.5 million, but I do think we can get more than just the locker room, and that'll be a goal.
All right, any other questions from Mr. O'Malley? Any chance of you getting any razor blades or anything like that, or you?
He's going to buy him a red suit for December.
Now that design looks.
I have to talk to Marcina about that, see if we can get that working.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion, or the recommendation is authorization to seek the qualifications for the services, architectural, and seek proposals on the construction at-risk services related to dryer wheel upgrades. Got a motion from Mr. Kokors. Do I have a second? Got a second from Mrs. Boehm. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Thank you, Richard.
Thank y'all very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Richard. All right, we will now, it is 7:10 p.m. and we're going to go into executive session. What do y'all want to take a quick break, or do you want, we'll take a 5-minute break, a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and go into executive session. It's 7:10 p.m., Layton. And under accordance of 551.071, 072, and 073.